Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Travel Mug Podcast. And this week, we are excited to dive into a topic that Megan and I actually don't know a lot or basically anything about, which is traveling with a baby. So, Rihanna and her husband from Teaspoon of Adventure decided to use their parental leave to take a 9-month trip with their baby daughter and their dog, and they explored several countries, and I'm not going to spoil where they went yet. So I'll let her tell us. She is here to help new and expectant parents plan adventures with their little ones. So, Rihanna, welcome to the show. Tell us about yourself and tell us where your love of travel started. I'm always interested in those answers.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So I was thinking back, and the first kind of big trip I took, I sort of found my way onto a family friends trip to the Philippines and Korea when I was 13. I think my parents were like, please take her, like, go, just go. So that was kind of my first taste of adventure, but in very like, I just went where they told us to go and sort of followed the path. And then kind of my first own foray into travel and adventure was I was 19 years old and I was back home after the semester at university, just kind of feeling like I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I could get a summer job, but I don't really want to. And I got this email for a flight deal to Europe. I was in Toronto at the time, and it was like $400 round trip. And I was like, oh, this is incredible. So I, messaged all my friends. I was like, who can come? Let's go, let's go. And nobody could commit, like, before the deal was going to expire. So I kind of went to my dad and I was like, can I just go? And he's like, you're 19, of course. Like, do what you want. So I did. So I booked that as my first trip to Europe, first time traveling solo, spent about 2.5 weeks kind of bopping around to all the big cities. And it was, I say that it was kind of the trip that started it all. Cause from there, I kind of any opportunity to travel I took. I studied abroad in Amsterdam. I volunteered in Southern Africa. I volunteered in Peru. I did an internship in Tokyo. My husband and I moved abroad to Prague a couple years ago for about a year. We did road trips in New Zealand. So really just any opportunity that popped up after that to travel was sort of, I was always game for it until it kind of became my job. And now I'm a full-time travel blogger.
So funny how those things happen.
Just, yeah, fell into it.
Yes, amazing.
Definitely. That's like a lot of adventure and people say they like to travel, but that's super serious and I love that for you. And so I guess I'd love to sort of dive in then because most parents spend their parental leave at home. There's so much going on, especially first-time parents. What made you, and I see obviously your love for travel, but what made you decide to take that and travel instead?
Yeah, so I think I had first heard of someone doing this probably almost 10 years ago. I had stumbled upon an article and it was a shorter time frame than what my husband and I ended up doing. But I think a couple had taken, a month or two out of their mat leave and they had sort of done a little trip to Southeast Asia. And they were saying, this was such a great time. We just strapped the baby to our chest and off we went. And that kind of got the wheels turning for me. And then for my husband, he works at a hospital here. So very like, he can't take his job on the road, not remote. Like he's got to be in office or not in office, in hospital. So for us, this was kind of the one opportunity that my husband was going to have a huge time off of work because he was able to take like paternal leave and also get a bit of a stipend from the Canadian government. So honestly, the only time we were going to be paid to have time off work. So we kind of decided like that would be such a great opportunity for us, like as a little family, to kind of introduce our daughter to the world, introduce her to this, thing we're really passionate about, travel. And when I first started cooking up this idea, I kind of pitched it to my husband as, Vancouver, where we live, is such a high cost of living city that if we're able to go and, live somewhere else for a few months, it actually could save us money. In the end, that didn't really happen based on some of the places we chose to go, but that was okay. We had saved up for it. But yeah, it was something, yeah, it's kind of sparked probably back in 2018, 2019, and then we didn't have our daughter till 2025. So it's really been something we've been planning and saving for many years.
Oh, interesting. So this you're really where you were planning well before the trip. So that makes sense. Yeah, that's really awesome. So did you have any like big fears or concerns maybe in the planning process or even like going up to leaving yeah,
For sure.
on your trip?
For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. So I think sort of the general ones that people would kind of think of, like, oh, safety, like, is baby going to be okay, routines and things like that. I think the way that we planned the trip, we were kind of able to alleviate a lot of those fears. Like, we weren't going to places where there's, unsafe conditions, or you can't drink the water, or you can get, dengue fever. Like, we were going to, spoiler alert, like Western Europe, like very, everything was very clean, comfortable. We were familiar places countries we had been to before. So that was, sort of alleviated a lot of those fears. So I think the other big fears we had were logistical, just sort of all the hoops we'd have to jump through, like applying for visas, getting our dog's paperwork, finding accommodation. We ended up ending our lease in Vancouver in order to go. So just sort of all the picking up and storing of our stuff. And then more on the emotional side, being away from friends and family for so long. And for both of our parents, this is like the first grandbaby. So that was, my mother-in-law, I could hear her in my ears like, "You're taking my grandbaby." That was a big one that we were very concerned about. And it worked out quite well. We actually had all of our parents came out at different times during our trip to visit with us. So that was really nice because not only, did we get to see them, they got to see their granddaughter, but we also got to, make really cool memories in Spain and the UK and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's
Excellent.
so awesome, and I think that, as, like, a big Disney person, one thing I hear is people like, "Oh, why are you taking your kids to Disney when they're, really young? They're not going to remember it," and I feel like parents need to think, like, "This is not for your kids, like, this is for you too," right? Like, this is about you and your family and, like, bonding time and doing things together. And I think that it's so awesome that you had, like, also extended family members come and do that with you too, because that's special for them.
Yeah, 100%. That was something I had posted a picture at one point of my daughter and I in front of the Eiffel Tower, and someone commented and said, like, "Sorry to say she'll never remember that." And I was like, "Oh, hold on. Like, let me like pull up my sleeves, get on the keyboard." And I said, "One, like, it doesn't matter. I remember it. My husband remembers it. We have these beautiful photos. We have this memory. And like, just because I'm a mom doesn't mean everything I do is in service of my baby. I'm allowed to pursue the things I love." But also, like, by that logic, she's not going to remember anything until she's 3 or 4. Should I just put her in a box and be like, "Hey, see you when you're 4 when you can remember this?" Of course not.
Right.
And then also, like, it's, I can talk more about this later, but like, it's shaped so much, I think, of who she is at only 16 months old. She's so open. She's so curious. Like, we've been visiting like daycares and community centers here at home, and like, she just runs right in, picks up toys, waves at people, so smiley. And I don't know that that was travel for sure, but I'd like to think, being in new environments, meeting new people every day, kind of doing something different really shaped who she is already at 16 months old. So I see so much benefit to travel with a baby for a family, regardless of whether or not they can like specifically tell you, like I can't even tell you what I had for breakfast this morning. Like that's just not a good reason for me
Right.
to not travel.
And I think, it will happen. I can guarantee it that later in life she'll be like, "I was there when I was a baby. I'll show you the pictures my parents took of me."
Yeah.
That will matter to her later, even if it didn't matter to her technically right then. I mean, I have had experiences like that in my life. And so as me as a kid versus me now, so that will matter to her, and that will be something she talks about later for sure. You of course mentioned Paris, you mentioned the UK, you mentioned Spain. So can you talk to us, where did you go, and like and of course you mentioned earlier safety and whatnot, but like how did you choose your destinations? What was sort of on your list of yes, we'll go there?
For sure. Yeah. So we started kind of on easy mode. I like to say we went to Toronto first, so keeping it domestic in Canada. And that's where my family's from. So it was this is their first chance to meet their granddaughter. So we spent about 10 weeks in Toronto, staying with family. So again, very easy, still in Canada, not a tough travel. From there, we flew to Paris and we went to a little city called Orléans in the Loire Valley of France. And we were based there for about 6 weeks. And the reason we chose that really was just Paris was an easy direct flight from Toronto. So we kind of said, we'll get to Paris. We probably can't afford to stay in Paris itself. So let's look for a city that's kind of an easy train ride away, somewhere that, got a lot going on. We can do day trips, but it's not, the hustle and bustle that is Paris. So we were really happy in the Loire Valley to go to lots of like castles and medieval towns and things like that on day trips, which was really fun. From there, we did a bit of a road trip up through northern France, through Normandy, up to a little town called Calais, where you can take a train over to the UK. And the reason we did that extremely convoluted route is because it's very hard to bring a dog into the UK. You can't fly them in, and you can't take them on the Channel, the train that goes from Paris to London. They don't allow dogs on that either. So the only way to go is through, well, not only way, there's ferries and things like that, but the kind of fastest, easiest way to go is through this town called Calais in France. And even then, you have to drive them on. You can't walk them on. And we obviously didn't have a car. So we paid a lot of money for a taxi to take us. on this route, you have to go to a vet. It's a whole thing. So that was sort of our convoluted way into the UK. And there we went to London for about a month, and then down to Brighton on the south coast, and then back to London, actually. And the whole reason we went to the UK was, I can get more into this in a bit, but we had actually originally applied for visas to France. Our plan was to kind of spend the whole time in France, but those visas didn't come through. So as Canadians, we're only allowed to be in the Schengen zone of Europe for 90 out of 180 days. So we couldn't spend the
Yep.
whole time in France, had to get out. So the options were kind of, if we wanted to stay in Europe, we're either up to the UK or down to some of the Baltic countries, or sorry, Balkans, not Baltic. And we were debating between the two, and the UK, even though it was tough to bring a dog in, at least there were very firm rules. Like it was easy to figure out what we had to do. Whereas with some of the countries, like we were kind of looking at like Albania, Montenegro, it was a little bit harder to figure out how we'd get our dog in and out. And we hadn't been there before, so we weren't as comfortable bringing a dog and a baby for the first time. Whereas the UK, we had traveled there before. Obviously, they speak English, so we're like, hey, if anything goes wrong, it'd be easy. So we ended up in the UK. London had always been a dream of mine to live in. At like 24, I used to say like, I'm moving to London. So when we started to look at the UK, I was like, okay, we can't do London. There's no way. We can't afford it. We can't afford it. But we were kind of just looking at other cities, and we wanted to be in a big city with amenities. Especially we didn't have a car. We didn't want to be in a small town. And London was always just a tiny bit more expensive. And we kind of just looked at each other and said, like, let's just do it. Like, we're going to up the budget a
Might
little
as
bit
well.
more. Right. We're already there. And yeah, we talked ourselves into it, and it was awesome. So yeah, London, and then we went to Brighton just to kind of give ourselves a tiny bit of a financial break from London. Not that Brighton is much cheaper, but it's another big city right on the coast, really cool, like artsy vibes, lots of great cafes and stuff like that. So a good place to kind of settle for a couple months. And then back to London for our final month. We originally had thought to go down to Italy, but it was just going to be, again, with the dog, it was going to be such a convoluted route to kind of train our way down there. And we found out that even though you can't fly a dog in cabin into London, you can fly them in cabin out of London. Again, very convoluted learning all of this. So we ended up just staying in London for our final month because we could fly home directly from there with our dog without having to, do anything special for her. So that's the long answer of where we went and why.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, no, I mean, those are all it sounds like traveling, with a dog overseas is a lot harder than
It
traveling.
sounds harder.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mentioned before, my husband and I, we moved to Prague in 2019 with plans to stay for a year, and we had our dog at that time. And that was actually like seamless. Like we flew into Paris as well, just because it's the direct flight from Vancouver. But like she was welcomed everywhere, like people putting out dog bowls, super happy to have her. As soon as we got to the EU, like paperwork, no problem. And once we got into the UK, it was fine. It was just getting in there
Yeah.
was trouble. But once we were there, like she's welcome to the shops and the pubs, and like, everyone's happy to have a dog around. But yeah, just the actual getting in was tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what, planning did you do before you left?
Yeah, so lots.
Yachts,
Yeah,
yeah.
I've had a spreadsheet going for literally years.
Yeah.
But I think kind of on the home front, like I said, we did end up we were renting a place in Vancouver, so we ended our lease, had to kind of pack up everything, sold, donated a lot, stored a few things. So that was kind of one sort of planning logistical headache. We did apply for those French visas, so that was another sort of big planning piece. Applying for those visas and then kind of figuring out our backup route after that. We really wanted to make sure all of our accommodation was booked ahead of time. I know a lot of people, when they do like long-term trips, a couple months, they kind of just book the first, couple weeks, first month or two, and then sort of say, hey, we'll figure it out. We'll see how we feel. If we like the place, we'll stay. To be honest, that's not really our style anyways. I'm a planner. I love a spreadsheet. So I'm always of the, if I can research all the places ahead of time, I will, rather than, walking around on the ground and to see what I like. And then especially with a baby and a dog, I really didn't want to leave it up to chance. Even then, because we did have to pivot and not stay in France as long as we wanted, we were kind of booking things as we went, but usually like a month or two out. So it was never a situation of like, I don't know where we're going to sleep tomorrow or next week. Like we always
no.
was not going to work with a dog and a baby. And then same with the long haul transportation. We wanted to make sure our flights and our, longer trains, car rentals, that sort of stuff was booked ahead of time too.
Now, what kind of visa were you trying to get with this situation with
Yeah.
with the French government?
Yeah, so there's a visa, and I'm obviously not a visa expert, so and
Yeah,
did
yeah.
not get the visa, so don't take what I'm saying as gospel. But there is a long stay tourist visa for France that gives you a year.
Okay.
And the idea is like you're not going to get a job in France when you get there. Like you're just visiting. You might be able to work online. That part is kind of questionable. So that was the one we had applied for, and it was just a situation where they don't provide much information online. Like one of the categories was like proof of socioeconomic status, and I was like, what does that mean? Like, do you want bank accounts? Do you want a tax report? Do you want like what do you need to see a certain number? It was very just sort of vague. And when we went to the visa processing office, they were like, we're not sure. Like maybe they'll call you if they don't have enough info. Maybe they won't. It was very, yeah, very up in the air. So that was, yeah. And when we got rejected, it just said incomplete or insufficient information. And they did tell you like what part of your application was insufficient or incomplete or, a number to call, nothing like that. So
Rihanna,
yeah,
it sounds like they didn't want you to have that visa,
right.
right?
Yeah. No, they did not.
Bureauc bureaucracy is so, so fun.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how you found planning travel with a baby different versus traveling as a couple. I think that's something that a lot of people have to wrap their mind around.
Totally, totally. Yeah, so I think for this, the biggest things were probably, I guess, in the planning stages, like before we got there, definitely the packing. We needed to be a lot more precise. We did end up bringing quite a bit of our own baby gear with us. So making sure we had, a crib and a high chair and a car seat and a stroller that were like as travel friendly as possible, but still something that, she'd be comfortable in for many, many months. The accommodation, as I said, like making sure it was baby friendly. So, not a lot of stairs, but also knowing that with the baby, we're going to be spending a lot more time at the accommodation. So, lots of space for her to crawl and play and like a full kitchen so we can make meals. Whereas when it was just my husband and I, it's okay, it's a studio apartment, who cares? Like we'll just come back and crash. Whereas like, okay, we need a bedroom, we need to be able to black out the windows, we have to be able to, is there space for the crib, that kind of stuff. And then in terms of the actual like day-to-day itinerary planning, I think that was probably the biggest change and something that really took me a long time to kind of accept that we were really going to need to slow down our sightseeing. Like, everyone says like, oh, with a baby, like basically your travel's going to change. You'll have to go slower. And people would say like, just try to do one thing a day, one thing a day. And I kind of held on to that as like my like, North Star, like, hey, we're going to do one thing a day, and not realizing that sometimes even that thing isn't going to look how you want. Like, okay, we're going to go to this museum. And I was like, great, we're going to go, we're going to spend the day at this museum. We're going to get to see everything. It's like, oh, no, like we're actually going to get there after her nap, and then she's going to be fussy, and we're not going to get to see the whole thing. And we're going to have to take turns going through this exhibit because there's not enough space for her stroller. And then, oh, we got to get back on the bus to get home for our next nap. And I'm going to have to breastfeed in a corner somewhere. So it wasn't, I think I really had to let go of the idea that there was going to be time for absolutely everything I wanted to do, especially as someone who researches so much and had all of these, things saved on Google Maps that I wanted to do or eat at or see. Just really letting go of the idea that we'd be able to get to everything in a single day or a single week or even a single month. That was sort of the biggest difference itinerary wise between like being with a couple or being with a baby.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that makes sense.
for sure. It makes sense. And I think that, especially if you're a first time parent, like you have no idea how it's going to go. And even if
Exactly.
you're having a second baby or something, like every baby is different and they need different things, and they need different nap times and that sort of thing. So yeah,
So we've heard.
so we've heard, but but yeah, like really, I definitely hear what you're saying about like letting go of like what you think it's going to be, and like really needing
Oh,
to just like roll with it.
Yeah, that might be parenting in a nutshell,
I
actually. Letting go of expectations and rolling with it. Yep.
that sounds that sounds right. So I'm curious why you chose slow travel, and maybe that goes back to what we were just saying, uh, over like constantly moving around. And is this how you traveled before you had a baby?
Yeah, so I think for us, because we were going to be away for so long, I think it had to be slow travel, especially with the dog and the baby. I think if it was one or the other, maybe we could have picked up the pace, but having both of them for 9 months, I think would have just been, because anytime we even told someone like, oh yeah, we're going to go abroad with our baby and our dog for 9 months, like people's eyes would just get bigger and bigger and be like, what? And then I'd kind of explain, okay, we're spending like a month in each place. And they'd kind of go, oh, okay, like you're more living there versus jumping around every few days. So I think that's the vision people see. They think like, okay, you're going to be on a
mm,
plane or a train every couple of days. It just would not have been sustainable with the dog and the baby and the multiple suitcases and all that. It is something we've kind of done before. When we lived in Prague for that year, I kind of see that as slow travel because we had that home base in Prague and we would do kind of day trips and weekend trips and week-long trips. But when we were away on those little trips, those were a lot faster paced.
Yeah.
So I think the idea of actually being like in a space for a long period of time while still trying to sightsee, that was kind of new for us. And I think part of the reason why I probably struggled with it so much was because it was this new experience.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
makes sense too. So I guess like there's the logistics of actually getting there. So talk to us sort of about how flights went. What did jet lag look like, especially flying with a baby, that kind of thing?
Totally. Yeah. So we tried to make the flights as easy as possible. So our first flight was Vancouver to Toronto, then Toronto to Paris. And then we did actually spend a week in Spain for our daughter's first birthday. So we did a little flight from London to Spain and back, and then London to Vancouver. So we tried to do direct flights, no stopovers. Our dog was actually the easiest on the flight. She just goes into her carrier, curls up, falls asleep, and she is small enough to stay in cabin with us. So that was great. We didn't have to worry about her at all. For our daughter, for the longer flight, so the one Vancouver to Toronto, Toronto to Paris, London back to Vancouver, we actually bought her a seat, even though under two, people always say, oh, they fly free under two. Not really. Usually you pay the taxes, you pay a percentage of the ticket, and then you're keeping them on your lap. So you're actually paying to not have like any extra space. It's the same amount of space you'd have if it was just you or just you and your partner. So we actually did buy her a seat, and we did that for a few reasons. One of them being, that London to Vancouver flight is 9 hours long. I don't really want to hold a 14-month-old on my lap for 9 hours. That's not fun. And then especially with our dog, because she's in cabin with us, she has to go at our feet. And you don't get an extra space for that, right? So if we didn't buy our daughter a seat, it would be me and my husband holding a 14-month-old with a 14-pound dog at our feet. And we're tall people, so that would not have been possible. So by getting our daughter a seat, the dog could go under her seat, and she's obviously in a car seat. So that actually worked out really, really well. And she was able to sleep in the car seat as well. And it's kind of, they say it's like the safest place for a baby. So that all worked out quite well flight wise. She did great. She only cried, maybe 15 minutes throughout the whole flight. In fact, on the way home, the people in front of us were like so charmed by her. They offered to take her 3 different times. They were like, can we hang out with her? I was like, sure. Like,
Well,
here she is. Like, handed her over. And my husband and I were like, okay, if someone else wants to do this. Great.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, so she did great. Jet lag was not too bad on the way there. I think we were all just so excited. You're in Paris. It's pretty easy to get hyped to get over jet lag. She was also still waking up in the middle of the night at that point for feeding, so it didn't feel like unusual for her to get up. The way home was harder. Very early mornings, we were getting up at like 2 a.m. to start the day. And we actually got a noise complaint in our new building because we started to unpack because our brains were just like, yeah, it's the daytime. And we're like moving boxes around, and we got a call at like, later in the day saying like, we're making a lot of noise at 4 a.m. And it's like, all right, we probably were. That was us. Sorry.
Indeed.
Yeah,
whoops.
so that took a week or two to kind of get back to normal. Just lots of, yeah, very early going to Starbucks like the minute they open because we've already been awake for, a few
Right.
hours. But we all made it. We got over it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think we've kind of mostly covered this, but how did you manage like naps and sleep schedules and sort of your daily routine? Did it take you a long time to really find your groove once you got there?
Yeah, I think this is probably something that would have been good for my husband and I to kind of discuss ahead of time, though I guess you don't really know until you're in the thick of it. But we did start following a pretty strict routine in terms of like what time we would want her to be napping, what time she's going to bed at night, and that sort of dictates, when meals and things like that happen. And a lot of times I felt a lot of resistance toward that because again, it would be, we're out doing something cool and it's like, okay, we got to get going, we got to get home for the nap. And we had kind of learned that she naps better at home in her crib. And it also gave my husband and I time to like, get to relax for a little bit. I was still working at the time. So that was, I'm able to pull out the laptop and get some work done if we all go home and kind of chill. But it was hard to leave things midday. And again, if we were doing like a fast trip, if we were only in London for a week, I think we would have just kept her in the stroller and been like, hey, you'll nap when you nap. Like, well, you're coming with us kind of thing. But because we had so much time, we were able to head back and do those naps and stick to that schedule, which I think in hindsight was really good. Again, it gave us that kind of downtime. It gave me time to work, and it gave her kind of a predictable, like, even though, we do something new every day, we eat somewhere new, we go to new things. I always am back in this room, in this crib, napping at these times with, the same pajamas, the same sleep sack, all that stuff. So I think that was probably good for her in terms of like having a routine, which they say is important for babies. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, do you think how do you think having a baby changed the way you experience these destinations, especially where they're somewhere you've been before?
totally. Yeah, it was actually probably most interesting in a place like London where I've been before because we got to spend so much time there and because having our daughter kept us kind of more in like a local community, it really felt like we got to kind of pretend for a little while like we lived in London. Like we actually were, a local family there. Like when we were in Brighton, we enrolled her in like swim classes. So we were, every Friday with the same group of people, teaching our infants how to swim and, going to library events, going to the playground, going to the parks, the people at the coffee shop, like recognizing us, waving to us. So that was really cool. I think in past trips to London, it was all about like, okay, let's see as much as possible, cover the whole city, never go to the same coffee shop twice. Whereas this was like, okay, like, every morning we're living above a coffee shop. We're walking in there every single morning. They know us, they're waving at us. And even just I think having a baby, especially one as like social as ours, really just like, people who are on the bus or on the tube, they've got their headphones in. When they look up and they see a baby waving at them, they're immediately like, oh, just like waving, smiling, chatting. And that's just such like a nice feeling, especially in a big city like London, that I think can feel kind of anonymous as
Old.
cold, anonymous, exactly, as you're traveling through, like everyone's very much in their own world. It was kind of a nice, even if we didn't make, lifelong friends on the tube, just that little moment of somebody, waving at her, doing peekaboo was always such a nice little like, oh, like that's cool. Like we had like a little human interaction there. So I think definitely would not have happened without a baby. No one's playing peekaboo with me on the tube.
Which is a shame, if you
Yeah.
want me to be
Right.
honest. It really is. It really is. I want to talk packing because I'm an overpacker. Jen's like the day pretty much she's a superhero and I'm like the anti-superhero when it comes to packing. But I want to ask, like, what did you think you'd need that you took that you never used? Was there something, if anything?
Yeah, a few things. So I think so specifically when we got to Europe, we got there kind of mid-September. And I don't know if we just, were very optimistic, but we brought like a bunch of summer clothes, even though we knew we'd be there from September till March. So actually, luckily, my mom came out to visit us pretty quick and we just sent her home with like dresses, shorts, sandals. And I was like, I don't know what we were thinking. This was not
Right.
necessary. And then we actually held on to clothes for our daughter. So my theory was kind of like, as she grows, we'll get rid of clothes, we'll donate them, and then we'll just buy new stuff like as she needs it. Popping into, there's lots of like charity, like secondhand shops in the UK, which we did do, but we also were given a lot of clothing before we left for Europe, like gifts or secondhand stuff. And it felt wasteful to me to not bring it when I was like, oh, she's gonna, grow into this. Let's bring it. So we ended up having like a pretty sizable, like vacuum sealed bag of clothing for her to grow into. And we just carried it for so long. And it wasn't until like the final month that we kind of pulled out one or two things. And even then, like she was still too small for a lot of it. And I was like, we should have just, donated it or sent it home, sent it to somebody else. We didn't really need to carry clothing she never wore the whole time. And then I think the biggest one was we actually packed a travel high chair. So it was like hard plastic. So it was travel friendly. And I just wanted like a safe space for her to be able to eat. I didn't want to have to hold her on my lap or put her in her stroller. But what I realized was the Airbnb hosts either had a high chair or were very willing to get one. Like when our last place in London, I said, hey, we have a baby. Is there a chance you could provide a high chair? And like within half an hour, there was a new one at our door. Like they just like, set one
Wow.
on whatever delivery system.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this could have saved us. It's pretty bulky, even though it's a lightweight high chair. It was annoying to have to put in a suitcase. So I was kind of like, oh, this probably would have solved, a lot of problems if we just asked ahead of time. And if they had said no, it would have been, whatever, 30, 40, $50 to get a high chair would have been worth it for staying in a place for a whole month. So I
Yeah.
would not have packed that.
That's
I
fair.
can see that.
Yeah, yeah. Are there any items that you consider like absolute lifesavers that you brought with you or maybe bought once you were there?
Yeah, I would say our travel stroller for sure. We did a ton of research on the travel stroller that we wanted. We wanted like super lightweight, but still obviously, comfortable, can grow with her and small enough to fit in the overhead bin of a plane. That was really important to me. I wanted to be able to like wheel it right onto the plane, wheel it right off. So that was, clutch. We use that multiple times a day. We still use it. We've never had another stroller before or after. We still just use the travel stroller. And it's so handy because even when you're not flying, there were so many times, especially in a city like London, where we did have to like fold up the stroller really quick. Like, you get to a tube station, elevators out of order. Like, okay, like fold up the stroller, grab the baby, let's go. Or we're at a restaurant. Okay, there's no space for your stroller. Great, collapse it, put it under the table. Getting onto buses, things like that. So it was really handy to have a stroller that was like kind of a workhorse. We put all our groceries underneath it, all of our stuff, but then also could fold up really tiny when we needed it. And then another thing we did was, because I was kind of working on the road, we kind of made like a portable workstation. So I had like a laptop stand that was like collapsible. Like they look like a little set of chopsticks, like super, super tiny. And it kind of opens up to hold my laptop, had like a Bluetooth keyboard and mouse. So just a few things that, like, because we were going to be in each place for a couple months, I didn't want to just be like hunched over my laptop on the couch. Like I wanted to kind of be able to set up a little bit. Didn't bring, a huge monitor screen or anything like that, but just a couple things to make it feel a little bit more comfortable for work. So that was really, really helpful for me.
Yeah, I got a travel second monitor and it's like,
Ooh.
it was a game changer
Nice.
last because I'm used to working with multiple screens.
Yeah,
And then yeah, I traveled last year to the Yukon and I was working and having the second screen, I was like, this is a lifesaver for me.
nice. Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Awesome. So, were there any like baby gear that you decided to leave at home and just buy locally while you were traveling?
Not too much. We really did. We brought a lot of the big stuffs, like the stroller, the car seat, the high chair, regrettably. The crib, we actually did pack our own travel crib. It folds up small, like a pack almost. You can wear it. And the reason we did a lot of that was I just didn't want to get to a place and, get there and be like, oh, this crib's kind of old. It's not really safe. And we're stuck with it for a month. Again, it's the only, she still sleeps in that crib right now, the travel crib. It's the one she's kind of had since day one. So I reasoned that, like, because it's our home crib and it's our travel crib, like, let's just take it. And then she can kind of have this like safe, dependable, it's always, even though the apartments change, I'm always in the same crib. So yeah, we did bring a lot of our own gear. And then I think anything that like big gear wise that some kids might have, like, a bathtub or like a little activity center or a swing, we just kind of figured like she's okay. She doesn't really need it. If she does, we could get it. But like, we bathed her in the sink and she was fine with that. Like she didn't really she still bathes in the sink. She's very happy with that as a plan. So we didn't really buy too much on the road for her besides a couple clothing items. Just it got cold. So we had to buy her a coat. And then just like, a few books and little souvenirs and toys and things like that, which did end up adding up to a lot because we just found so many adorable, cute things we wanted to bring home. But
Right,
yeah,
right.
in terms of gear, we didn't buy too much.
Makes sense to take things that work, are comfortable for her and that aren't taking up too much room anyway. And plus, when you get to a place, what if they didn't have what they said they would have, and then you have nowhere for your baby to sleep and you're scrambling trying to find something. So like
Really.
those things makes good sense. And I think that that's just really good planning on your part for sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm like thinking of, I don't have any children, but like most of my friends do. And I'm thinking of like all the stuff they get at baby showers, right? Like you get so much stuff.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like taking a step back, me like, do I really need this? Like, am I ever going to use this? Can I do something else, like bathe them in the sink instead of using this like plastic tub thing like it's
Yeah,
just using your
totally.
brain a little bit to think about like, do I actually need this? I mean,
Totally.
Megan needs to do that when she travels too. Do I actually need this?
What about
Or
you, Green? I actually blank out and like just end up with a packed suitcase and hope for the best, really.
it's
Yeah, no,
like that meme that's like, do I need 3 trombones or 4? And it's like, I've never played a trombone in my life.
I need 4 generally, but that's just me. What if you were to think back, and I'm sure there's a ton, but if you could narrow it down, like what are your favorite memories from the trip?
Yeah, I think the first ones that kind of come to mind are just like some of her baby milestones that she happened to have in really cool places. Like she started crawling when we were in Orleans, when my mom was there visiting us in France. She took her first steps in Brighton. She celebrated her first birthday in Spain. So those are kind of fun, I think for the rest of her life. Not people talk about this daily or anything, but like if she ever asks, like, oh, like, where's my first birthday? When did I learn to walk? It's like, oh, here's the video. We were in the UK. I think that's quite cool, those little milestones. Living in London, just because it was such like a bucket list thing that I've kind of wanted to do for the last decade plus. That was so cool to be able to do that. And my vision of it, growing up was always like just like I'd be, the 20 something like working girl, like out on my own. And to be able to go back to London like with a husband, a baby, and a dog was like never something I pictured. So that was
Mm.
very cool to kind of like check that off the bucket list. Yeah, just castles in France were pretty amazing. That was fun to to go through. We really loved Brighton just as a city. It felt very similar to Vancouver, just sort of vibe wise, with lots of, natural beauty and street art and cafe culture. Yeah, those are kind of broad memories, but sort my
Yeah.
favorite ones.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm wondering what advice you would give parents who are considering maybe a similar adventure of like multi months, but maybe even just their like first trip overseas with a baby.
Yeah, so I think similar to what you were saying, I think packing less is a big one. There is, yes, I think there's a lot of virtue in doing your research, having the gear that like works for you and your family. But I think especially if you're going to places like, a London, a Paris, like they're gonna have diapers, they're gonna have wipes, they're gonna have toys and clothes and books. Like you don't need to pack, the kitchen sink. And just sort of taking your kids' lead too. Like, we didn't bring a lot of toys for her. And the first few days in France, she would take my yogurt containers out of the recycling and make towers out of those. And I was like, perfect. We got stacking blocks. Great. Like they're very adaptable. My next piece of advice would be to slow down the itinerary, plan less. And this was one that I, struggled with, but kind of keeping in mind, like, this might be your first trip with your baby. It's not your last. You can go back to London. You can go back to Paris. Like, you don't have to see absolutely every single thing. And then my final piece of advice is just to do it. If you have the money, if you have the time, which is rare. I know not every parent is able to take off this kind of time and do this kind of trip. It doesn't, like you said, it doesn't have to be 9 months. It can be shorter. It can be closer to home. But if you are able to do something like this, it's so cool. It will change your baby, your family. It'll be something you remember for the rest of your life, even if your kid doesn't. They're still going to get so much out of it. So definitely, I highly recommend going on some version of your own, trip with your baby. It's the coolest thing.
And looking back, is there anything you wish you would have done differently?
Well, if I knew we weren't going to get those France visas, I wouldn't have sunk so much time and money into that.
Correct. Yeah.
That would be a big one. Um, Assuming I didn't know that, I think it is probably more just down to that pace. I think I really did struggle a lot with, I guess, like FOMO, for lack of a better word, of just like, literally we would walk past a cafe. There's a distinct cafe I can remember, and a friend told me like, oh, you have to try that. And we walked past it almost daily, and just the hours never lined up with her naps, and we never got to go. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm walking by this place I want to go to, like, and I can't go. That resistance. But I wish I had, I don't know, sat down with myself or with my husband and just said like, yes, we are limited by, her naps, her schedule, this routine that we've decided to stick to, but also like, because of this routine, we're getting so much more. We're getting to explore a local community. We're getting to have this time as a family, and just like, especially now that we're back home and my husband's back at work, just appreciating, like, even if we're not out, you know, doing the best sightseeing that London's ever seen, the fact that we are just like as a family in London having a meal together, the three of us at home, and the dog, the four of us, like, that is, that's really special. And just kind of cherishing those moments. I wish I had, I think I did appreciate it at the time, but I wish I had stopped trying to cram in more. I wish I just sort of sunk into those moments and appreciated them for what they were.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds so special, and I'm really glad that you had the opportunity to do that with your family. I think that's amazing, bonding time
Totally.
together. So tell us about where our listeners, anyone listening out there, can find you to learn more about your travels.
Thank you. So I have my blog, teaspoonofadventure.com. I'll put up lots of itineraries, things to do, first time tips, that sort of thing. And then I also have a Substack. It's the same name, teaspoonofadventure.substack.com. And that's where I kind of do more like behind the scenes, stories from our travels, things we messed up, things we get right, that sort of stuff.
So
Amazing.
are you on Instagram at all?
I'm not. No,
Okay.
I tried it a couple years ago and then just
You know, it's a
couldn't,
lot.
Well,
It's a
couldn't keep
lot.
up.
I don't
Yeah.
I don't blame you. Ugh.
No, website and Substack is enough for sure. Well,
Yeah,
first and foremost, we appreciate you reaching out and initiating this, because I think it's definitely something that Jen and I do not have expertise in, obviously, nor have we really covered on the podcast. And I do think, there are our listeners out there from wherever in the world that probably want to try some type of trip with the baby. And I think these are all really good pieces of information for people to have. They can learn from what you did, learn from maybe what you would have done differently, that kind of thing. And I think that those things are going to be very important. So first and foremost, thank you so much.
thank you.
Um, Yeah, no, my pleasure. As for the podcast, as usual, you can find us at our website, travelmugpodcast.com. You can find us on social media at Travel Mug Podcast. Leave us a review or buy us a coffee. The link is in the show notes. And either way, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, safe travels and don't forget your travel mug.